On 3 December 2021, the government of Zimbabwe gazetted the Data Protection Act. The law was originally referred to as the Cybersecurity and Data Protection Bill. Now, the law will safeguard users in cyberspace, and other countries do have similar laws. The Data Protection Act consolidates several pieces of legislation that govern cybersecurity as well as data protection. These include the Postal and Telecommunications Act, the Official Secrets Act, the Criminal Law and Codification Act, as well as the Interceptions of Communications Act. This is Inside Out. I am Yvonne Mukondeni, and today we will be looking at this particular act and what it means to us as Zimbabweans. But before we get into the discussion of the day, we went onto the streets of Harare just to find out whether or not people really understand what this is about, and this is what they had to say.
Taita kuti information isangorasika rasika.
Zvakanaka kuti hatungotumira information kuna wese wese. Ngekuti dzimwe information dzinokonzeresa maproblems. Dzinonyangadza nyikawo zvakare.
Ukupamhanisa imithetho liyana cyber security liyana. Kupamhanisa endaweni eziningi because abantu bayazibulala ngendaba zokuthi umuntu uyakwanisa ukuposta into ezingayenziyo kuma social media.
Nokuti munhu ayeke phone yangu atore information yangu kana maphotos angu achitenderedza. It's not good. It's more good zvachose.
Ndona mutemo wese wakakosha nekuti wakutidzivirira isu vechidiki.
Issue yecyberbullying ndo issue tori serious because nona unonga achisenda mapika asinaonaka painternet emunhu of which munhu life yake inotorunika ipapo haatozokwanisa kufamba muroad,
especially zvima-chain messages. Zvinhu zvakangoipezvo zvinoita kuti vanhu tikasike tapanika like zveCovid.
I think it's a good idea because lots of girls are suffering from it. Let's say negotiate someone, nechisendirana zvanhu nosendirana, then kana manetsana akuku attack achiti I'm going to send it to everywhere, to social media. So I think it's a good idea.
Unotibatsira pakuti pane false information inosirculate, and then you end up wakupanika kuti maybe chinhu chakadai ndikaenda in a certain place maybe ndogona kusangana neaccident, but zvinenge zvisiri izvo.
Handina kudzika nayo, but pane zvimwe zvinhu zvairi kuedza kuadresa zvatakaona kuti iri kugona, zvakafanana nekuti munhu anoposta manudzi evanhu vanodifema character yemunhu paFacebook, painternet, handiti. Saka izvozvo the bill has a long way to go kuedza kugadzirisa kuti dignity yemunhu ite sei ichengetedzwe.
Joining us in the studio today to help us with this discussion, we have Simbarashe Murondote, who is an attorney. He is also an ethical hacker. We also have Rumbidzai Venge, an attorney as well. Thank you for joining us. To start off the conversation, I just want us to pick up from the clips that we've been watching. Do you think Zimbabweans actually understand what this act is about?
Thank you, Yvonne, and for this platform and such a crucial opportunity to address this issue. I think it seems to me like there's a general understanding of what harm can be caused through the cyberspace, because the cyberspace has now become a breeding ground for false information. If you rely on false information, it can then lead to certain consequences that may see you actually suffer. Your health might suffer, you might lose money. There's quite a lot of issues that then come intertwined there. The issue of cyberbullying has also been canvassed quite clearly by the younger generation, and even from those clips, it's clear that they understand that someone cannot take images that they took of you without your consent and use them to actually bully you and to put you in a position of disrepute with other people. What they may not understand, however, is that these are all laws that were provided for previously. In our criminal act, there are several infractions that are already provided for, but they were not provided for in the digital space. And I feel this is what the act does, and it's important because we are moving into the the Internet of Things, the fourth revolution, which is very much internet-based and technological-based. So it's important that we also protect those spaces, because a lot of information, a lot happens on the internet.
A lot happens on the internet, and the hacking, is something that really happens. It's something that keeps us worried. And your profile says you are an ethical hacker. Indeed. What is an ethical hacker?
Well, thank you for that question. An ethical hacker is an individual who assists other individuals and organizations by attempting a hack of their systems, penetration testing, and performing other procedures to ensure that they are aware of their vulnerabilities. So an ethical hacker hacks only ethically.
Only ethically. Is there anything like hacking ethically?
Yes.
So you say you hack, but the only difference between you and the hackers is that you do it ethically.
We do it with consent.
With consent.
Yes, and so consent is the key ingredient. So there is an intersection between ethical hacking and the law.
Okay.
And ethical hacking is actually beneficial because you're trying to look into an organization and identify weaknesses and prevent instances of actual hacking.
Having said that, what then are the key takeaways of this act? Points that we feel Zimbabweans should be made aware of?
A very important point, I think, is that there is criminalization of digital crimes now, specifically, explicitly. If you, it's commonly called upskirting. If you take images of someone without their consent, you use those images to then bring their image into disrepute. It also is sometimes used as a mode of blackmail and extortion. This is now being ring-fenced and it is being called criminal and being dealt with in a digital space outside of the pre-standing crimes that you would find in the Post and Telecommunications Act in the Criminal Code. So it's more specific, and it's saying, okay, if you do this, then you'll be found guilty. It also goes a little bit further to talk about what happens if say you've got a Lively page where you sell your makeup or you're selling your clothes. I go on there and then I say, don't buy from Yvonne because of A, B, C, D. It also criminalizes that. It also puts into the very important focus what information is available for the public to look at when data is being collected. Because, I mean, your biometrics, for example, when you look at the COVID results that are always generated, we don't see the names of the people, but that's information that's been collected. So it's important that we know what can legally be put out there, what is private, what is public. And then also there's a lot of companies who then use this data. Sometimes, you call it the algorithm, that then you start getting messages all of a sudden. If you visit a page, would you like to do this? Would you like to do that? And a lot of people felt that this was an infraction on their privacy. What is done with the data that you give out on WhatsApp Business, for example? So these are very important factors, and the companies that then are involved in the data collection, your mobile telecommunications companies, how much rope do they have and what can they do with this information? So I think the act really comes down to the ground and spells out a lot of these things.
What is it that they do with this information? Because you find that many a times when you're signing up for things on Google or several pages, they ask for information and they tell you that this information may be used. So what is it that they use that information for? Because sometimes because you want to use an app so much, you don't pay attention to the consequences that may come with you giving up your information. So what does it mean?
What the Act does is it recognizes that it's normal for institutions to want to process information. So there's the concept of data processing. And the information, for instance, I'll use the example of a medical institution. They want to know your blood type, they want to know your allergies, they want to know the sicknesses or the ailments you've suffered from in the past. All that is information that they need in order to provide a service. But on the flip side, it's information which in the wrong hands can be used to denigrate you or can be used to scandalize you or to as a stigma against you. So the balance is, or where the fine balance is that Section 57 of the Constitution, subsection 3, provides for the right to privacy, but also the right to keep your information about your healthcare private. So when that information gets in the wrong hands, it can be used against you. So companies that process data now have standards that they have to adhere to. For instance, the purpose limitation standard, which has been adopted in the Act but is coming from other jurisdictions. The fact that they have to, the data being collected has to be collected for the specific and narrow purpose that they need to use it for.
Let's talk about something that's happening on a day-to-day, my live, by Facebook, by Instagram. These keep us entertained every day. Sometimes I actually log onto my Facebook when I find out, oh, here's Rumbi done a live, this and this is happening on the streets. How then is this law going to tackle that? Because I may be in the UK. Obviously, they do have such laws that speak to these issues. But then I do my live in the UK and I'm busy attacking you here in Zimbabwe. How is that dealt with?
Interesting that you asked that, and it's very, very convenient that the Act also has a provision that deals with that. It also now extends its tentacles, if you like, to also deal with perpetrators that you've just described. So someone who may be outside of the jurisdiction of Zimbabwe, maybe you're in Scandinavia, you're in the UK, you're in the US, but if you are using the social media space, if you're using the cyberspace as a medium to bully someone else, as a medium to assault someone else, as a medium to defame someone else, then you can be singled out and actually prosecuted for that particular offense, regardless of where you are. So the Act also recognizes the limitless nature of the digital space, and the fact that someone can actually commit a crime all the way out there. But it simply says, you know what, we recognize that, and we now want to start bringing people to account, which I think is very progressive. But I must hasten to state that it's almost like, you know, when you buy a new pair of shoes, you have to walk them in. You've got to break them in. And there's several things in this Act that I believe will need walking in, will need testing, but I think it's important that they're actually being set out and being recognized as possible modes of relief and recourse for people affected.
We've had several instances where people have hacked platforms such as WhatsApp and people have lost money. We've actually had a number of people here at ZBC who've lost money through that kind of hacking. What does this law do, or what does it say in as far as addressing this? And one thing that I find disturbing is that when we had those cases here and those cases were reported to the police, it looked like they weren't really equipped to deal with them. So how equipped are we as a country, as the legal force, as the police, to deal with such matters?
What the Act does is it introduces amendments to the Criminal Law Codification and Reform Act. And of particular interest are sections 162, 163, and 164 of that Act, which have been amended. One of those provisions is a prohibition on hacking. Previously, we had the Criminal Law Code detailing computer crimes, but there was no express prohibition against hacking. So there is now a prohibition against hacking, and hacking is now a criminal offense, expressly as stated in the new Act. Now, what this means is, if someone generates a malicious code, for instance, or a link, in the hope of getting a backdoor into someone's computer system, or in the hope of breaching someone's computer network, what that will do is it has become an offense, and you are able to report that to the police. The Act introduces a cybersecurity center that can be used for investigating such matters, because it's possible from a technological perspective to look into the post-mortem of a computer network that has been hacked and to trace the source of the hack. So those investigations are technologically possible. The Act introduces the Cybersecurity Center, and government must now make allowance for it in the budget, so that these matters are, because there is an injurious effect, you know, on hacking. Many people have lost their identities. In South Africa, Thisile Kumalo, a very popular case on identity theft, left the victim susceptible to further, you know, civil lawsuits against the company which had lost money as a result. So this is something that is in the offing, it's something that's needed, and it's something we must do now.
He mentions identity theft, and it just brings me to think about card cloning and other, you know, issues like that. How rife are these in Zimbabwe?
Oh my goodness, take a number. I mean, this it's happening everywhere. There's also something called phishing, not with a fishing rod, but where, you know, they generate messages and then you click on it, and because they've got your information. So many people seem to take everything they see on the internet at face value and they think it's true. So it's very, very important for people not to believe everything they see and hear on the internet. It's happening absolutely everywhere. Many people in different age demographics have lost lots of money. Their identities have been stolen. There's actually rings of people coming together where they will maybe contact a construction company and place a huge order, use someone's stolen card, pay for that. Then when they come and deliver, or maybe they say no change, come and deliver these things to a different address, and then the next thing you see on your card statement, these huge amounts being deducted, and then these people are in the wind because, like Simba mentioned, very, very importantly, the equipment and the technical know-how and, you know, the mainframe and the hardware was not in place. But it's happening quite a lot, and it's almost like like the criminals are also keeping up to speed with all of these crimes, and it's become so rife.
So is it possible for us then to protect ourselves from such card cloning, for instance?
Absolutely. I think you as an individual have got to take self-autonomy is really important. Things like you'll see that they say, please protect your PIN. When you're in the supermarket, for example, cover it up with your palm when you're putting in your PIN so that nobody can see it. Don't give out your personal identification number to anyone. When you get your statements in the mail and anything from your bank, shred it. Make sure there is no trace of that. But it takes a lot of discipline as individuals to actually also see this through. Just keep watching. Don't log on to open networks. Make sure you've got an antivirus. You block things. Don't go onto any network and then you're logging into your online banking. It's things like that that leave you open and susceptible to these cyber thieves.
Other schools of thought, Misa Zimbabwe, for example, of the view that, this act may be used to stifle the work of civil society and whistleblowers, and they say some parts of it actually infringe on the freedom of expression as enshrined in the national constitution. What do you have to say about that?
People are allowed to have their fears, but it's not for us to declare an act unconstitutional. I think it's the wrong forum. As an attorney, I know better that we have to approach the Constitutional Court if we have a complaint against a statute as being potentially offending, because the Constitutional Court or any court sitting as a Constitutional Court has that remit. Now, on the substance of what you've asked, the freedom of expression is a guarantee in terms of the Constitution, but so is the freedom of the right to privacy. So the law potentially features a conflict between two rights. On one hand, the right to privacy, on the other hand, the right to express oneself, the right to human dignity and the right to express oneself. How far can we limit one's right to call someone a dog whenever they feel like? But on the flip side, I do understand the concern, because the concern comes from a democratic, point of view, and it is a legitimate concern, but the concern has to be aired out to the Constitutional Court. Now, we look at the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Article 20, sub-article 2, actually provides that nation states, of which Zimbabwe is a party, should have a law that prohibits messages that are likely to incite violence. So the law accords with international standards. If, however, it is used in a manner that is offending to the Constitution, then by all means, organizations of high esteem, such as MISA, as you mentioned, are at liberty to approach a court sitting as a constitutional court to declare the offending part of the law unconstitutional. But it's too soon to say, because as she said, every shoe has to be broken in.
Ruby, the stifling of civil society and whistleblowers.
I sort of feel like on the whistleblower aspect, maybe let me deal with that aspect first. I felt that the act was rather silent on protection of whistleblowers. What happens if I expose someone who is actually engaging in these crimes? There needs to be a level of protection extended, but I feel that these are things that can then later be incorporated as we go forward. On the stifling of civil liberties, looking at these rights, the constitutional rights as they stand, they are qualified. This means that these rights have to interact with each other as well as the other rights of other people. That qualified right, it's not an open license for you to go around insulting everyone because I've got the freedom of speech, because I can express myself, because I've got the right to access information. There are limits to these rights, and these limitations are constitutional, contained within our constitution. And I think as long as we're coloring within those lines, then there is no infraction.
Now let's look at children. Many of them are abused online, cyberbullying. Some of them are exposed to pornography. How does this act speak to that?
The act prohibits expressly exposure of children to pornography. So it's now an offense to expose children to pornography, and rightly so, because our constitution designates that the law has to be applied in the best interest of the child. The law also goes a step further and protects children against cyberbullying. So these are things that people need to see. However, at some point, we may be lost in definition, because every law has to be fit within a set of circumstances.
Children?
No, absolutely. Children must be protected. We have Section 81 that deals with children and the rights that they're entitled to. We have the Children's Act. We have the Criminal Code that speak to protection of children, but on the digital space, and I mean pornography at the moment, whether it's child pornography or otherwise, is unlawful. Exchange of the same is also unlawful. These are things that are very stalwart in our law as it stands. But I think it's important that we have this digital policy that speaks to these issues. I think more can be done in that, because I would have liked to see clauses that speak to grooming, for example. What happens to someone who's grooming a child? What happens to people who are involved at that level and are really sort of pushing children down this really, really horrible path? So I think more should be done as a deterrent, so that we see more. I mean, enough has. It's an effort, and I want to acknowledge that, but I think more can be done to explicitly also widen the net and make sure that anyone at any level who's involved is criminalized, and they're paying for what they're doing, because children must remain children. Children must be protected. And go further, anyone who's seen distributing, liking, or anything, if your IP address appears there, what happens to you? You know, so they seem to be bystanders who sort of say, oh, but I didn't generate the content. I just looked at it. Did you also realize, Yvonne, that even my saying, oh, have you seen this child who was involved in this, and sending it to you on WhatsApp?
And we do that a lot.
We do. Is also aiding in the problem. We're actually distributing as well. So I think we also need to look at that socially as well as legally, and see what else can be done in that respect.
The distribution of child pornography. Have you had many cases maybe of pedophiles who take advantage of children, abuse them, take clips of them and distribute them online? How rampant are those cases in Zimbabwe?
I don't think it's foreign at all. I think they are very close to home. And I think the fact that they have not been publicized is not testament to the fact that to the suggestion that it's not happening. I think it's happening. And actually, the non-publication or the fact that it's not in the public domain is what should be concerning to us, because it's happening in the cover of a home environment. It's happening where the law may not be able to reach. And I think it's a clarion call to social security organizations, civil service organizations, to come together and actually assist children who may find themselves in those circumstances.
And you brought up an interesting aspect, you know, how we distribute or how we send these videos and these pictures to each other, and we are not aware of the consequences that come with such. What do you have to say to Zimbabweans, you know, regarding this? Because this is something that we do every single day.
Yeah, I'll speak very directly to all the Zimbabweans watching this. Don't do it. I think there's certain things, and I'll even say it in Shona, food wine is you don't have to forward everything you receive, because you could spend a night in jail. You could be found to be guilty. And imagine, you were distributing. Kiddy porn. You can't do that. So I think certain things, read it in the paper. Are you, okay, you see it, are you a reporter all of a sudden? Why are you becoming the source of everyone's information? I think let's be more responsible. You don't have to click send on everything that you receive in your phone.
Let's talk about, as we conclude, mastika that we have on WhatsApp. If you saw one that has been circulating, is it on Tawanda or Tinashe, who sent something in a family group, and you know, was saying, was it today? You know, does it speak to the stickers as well? Is it part of pornographic material?
It is. It's pornographic material, and that would, if I'm asked to give a legal opinion, that would constitute an offense to this law that has just come in. So I think we need to approach this law with so much caution, tremendous caution, as you know, as the generality of Zimbabweans. This is a new law, but there is a maxim of law that says ignorance of the law is not an excuse. We need to approach this with so much caution. It's highly unlikely that Abraham Babangida is going to email you with a promise of 20 million bucks. It's highly unlikely that Winnie Mandela is going to ask you to assist in a estate matter. You know, it's highly unlikely that you've won $20 million because Coca-Cola has turned 1,000 years.
I know, right?
Just keep it to yourself and don't be preoccupied with things that don't concern you so much. Don't forward a message if you don't have to. Verify the message before you send. It's time we are vigilant on the cyberspace. The law is not new. It's been there in South Africa and they're surviving with it. So that's what I have to say.
The maximum fines when it comes to this, Act, the jail terms, how are they like?
I think they haven't really departed too much from the pre-standing positions where you would see that you're looking at between level 1 and level 4. Then there are things that are called aggravating circumstances. Each case is dealt with on its merits, on the different circumstances. So it depends on how egregious what you've done is, what is it that you've actually done, and the court in each case will then dole out a commensurate sentence. But I feel like, yeah, I think we need to see more people being fined. It's important that they know that a lack of common sense and being trigger happy with your thumbs comes at a cost.
This is Inside Out, and today we have been looking at the Data Protection Act, which was gazetted on the 3rd of December this year. I hope you've been following, and I hope you will be careful in whatever it is that you do in the cyberspace, because it may be tantamount to a crime and you do not want to be found wanting. Thank you very much for having joined us.
Thank you.
Pleasure is mine.
And thank you very much for having joined us. Until we meet again, hopefully next week, pleasant viewing.